Please comment where you are listening from in the world. Thank you, let's dive in. So I decided to punish myself this evening and reinstall Tinder for the 80th time. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result, and tonight I have perpetuated this notion. Maybe I subconsciously enjoy the pain. This isn't a rant about not achieving a desired result on Tinder. I have no real end goal. I'm not thirsty. I really couldn't give a fuck about the outcome of my Tinder endeavors. This is a rant about some of the shit people say in their bios. I have questions. Here are some of the bios I've come across. Mentally ill with daddy issues and a drinking problem. Dating me is like taking too much acid. Mentally unstable and obsessed with red flags. Who is this for? Who reads this and thinks, that's her. That's someone I want to penetrate. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Have mental health problems, hell, have 2 or 3. Lord knows I'm no spring chicken. Have baggage, have trauma from past experiences. Nothing inherently wrong with any of this. I just cannot fathom why you would advertise this shit as some kind of enticing personality quirk. Imagine a man saying this. Wouldn't you run for the hills? Imagine the people that they match with. What kind of man reads a bio like that and thinks this could work to my advantage? Seek help. You are fishing for sharks with your bare hands, and your friends will have to deal with the inevitable bullshit that comes out of this. Do you want someone to save you? Because I think the probability is you have a 3-month relationship that starts off extremely passionate. You say I love you after you spend 14 straight days together after your first date, and it's full of wild, low-key terrifying sex and impulsive behavior. And it ends horrifically when you realize you're both total fucked up emotional vampires. And then what? It's a tale as old as time. You don't need Tinder, you need therapy. Dating you is like taking too much acid? You need a warehouse full of able bodies to unpack a statement like that. I would rather die alone. Then you've got. I can leg press you. I can probably scull a beer faster than you. I'm funnier than you. I'd beat you in tennis. Is there a market for this? Are there men out there who are turned on by the thought of being leg pressed by their girlfriend? Is everything going to be a competition? It gives off intense, I'm always right vibes. If you know, you wish you didn't know. Are there men out there who read a bio like, I'm better than you at stuff, and think that's so hot, talk down to me more, insult me mummy, disrespect my intelligence belittle me? What do you get out of that? And then you've got variations of, I won't message first, you need to be X and Y and own X item, and have X haircut, etc., etc., etc. Which essentially says, I'm hard work, I am an asset that you need to work for, you will constantly be falling over yourself to impress me. Well, I'm sold. That sounds like a valuable way to spend a couple of years of my early 20s. I need to be constantly reminded of your constantly appreciating value. You could have anyone you want, but you chose me, and I should be grateful. Visit a slum or something. Kendrick was onto something when he said, be humble. I find it disheartening that this kind of arrogance and these unwavering, unrealistic standards are applauded as self-love. They just know what they want, right? Sure. Let's give people exactly what they want all the time. That'll end well for society. You deserve this. Less confusing, but more excruciatingly boring, are the classic. Avocado is overrated, haha. Coffee red heart. My controversial opinion is, insert possibly the least interesting thought anyone has ever had in the history of consciousness. Like, I'm not as emotional about this one. It's just so unoriginal, so uncreative, and it's so out of place when it's slapped underneath a pair of bare-ass cheeks. You're going for wholesome when I can just about see your literal, actual asshole. You are telling me that you enjoy eating food and drinking coffee. Do you also enjoy breathing? Sleeping in bed is great too. Walking is something you do for sure sometimes. Maybe even watching TV when you're feeling wild. Also, I absolutely love that you can just take a picture of the place you shit out of, and it just works. You don't get lost in someone's eyes anymore. You get lost in their ass cheeks, the depth of the crack, the poetry of underwear. Elegant. Classy. Mysterious. Tinder Bums, the movie. Finally, you've got the way too muchers. Don't be boring. Let's talk about intelligent things. Biochemistry, Jordan Peterson, chemicals, neuroscience. It went on like that for what felt like a lifetime. This was an actual bio I read. The depths of the darkness can only be illuminated by 2 hearts coming together to create a light. This also went on for half a screen. Honestly, these kinds of people are probably actually interesting and have something to offer to the right person. I just think you're trying too hard to communicate who you are, to convey depth. Why? Who is this for? Okay, we get it. You are profound and your blog is worth a read. Do I want to meet up with you and have my taste in wine critiqued while we unironically talk about chemicals? That sounds really hot. Let me get back to you on that one. There are so many funny bios out there, don't get me wrong, so many awesome chats to be had. It's definitely a roller coaster. The best bios I see are ones where you can tell that they genuinely don't really give a fuck instead of just pretending they don't give a fuck to cover up the fact that they give more of a fuck than they'll ever be able to admit to themselves. It's really not subtle. I swiped through Tinder and just, oh, honey, love yourself. Online dating is not for me. I think that as a general rule, myself included, the name of the game is to put a strong foot forward, to amplify traits in your personality that you think are attractive or interesting. But in the long run, this is never sustainable. You try to communicate yourself as something that you can only really be on your best days. What about when the honeymoon phase is over and you're comfortable with just chilling and being your normal self? What happens when it becomes clear that you're both only 20% of what you made yourself out to be on your Tinder profile? Is that not a giant waste of time and an overall shitty experience? People are layered and nuanced, and condensing them down into 6 photos in a sentence, it just isn't real. Goodbye forever, Tinder. See you next week. I know it probably sounds bad, but hear me out. In my head it's a long story, but I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible. Sorry if it sounds choppy. Also, English isn't my first language. Last year I had to move in with my parents because I was having a hard time finding a new place to rent after a really bad breakup. My parents and I don't get along great for a lot of reasons, and it made everything a lot worse. So to get out of that, I eventually decided to apply for some jobs in other places. At the time I really didn't want to, since I'd lived in that city my whole life, and I liked my job, but I just couldn't stay with my parents anymore. I found a job pretty quickly because this hotel was reopening after changing owners, and they weren't finding staff easily. So I ended up moving here in October. In the beginning I wasn't socializing much because it's really hard to find friends here when everyone already knows everyone. My country and region are doing well, no confirmed cases in town yet, but it definitely didn't help with making friends. I've also been pretty busy because I decided to buy a house. It just kind of happened because my boss knew the previous owners, and it was super cheap since it needed a lot of work, but it definitely made this move feel very permanent. Then in May, this guy, let's call him Eric, and I got stuck in the social distancing queue outside the pharmacy together and started talking. I told him I was new, and he invited me to a barbecue with his friends. NGL, I'm not great with new people, but they made me feel welcome and were all very nice. After that we just kept hanging out, mostly me and Eric, which I thought was because he was quite careful during these times and only saw his big group of friends outside. Plus we were the only 2 who weren't in a relationship or had kids, so it made sense in my head that we were alone a lot. I'd cook him dinner/lunch, I'm a chef, and he'd show me great hiking places and help out a lot with the renovations on the house. I also started telling him about the breakup and stuff, and even though I feel like I've moved on, it was still nice that he was so understanding. Like, I always thought it sounded so cheesy when people talked about knowing like a week into a friendship or relationship that it was going to be different, but that's the only way I can describe what it's felt like. I promise now that I'm writing it down, it's so obvious, but I honestly didn't think much of it since I've never dated a guy before. Then like 2 to 3 weeks ago he called and asked if I wanted to have dinner on my next night off, and also said just you and me. He seemed kind of weird and formal, but I assumed it was something else going on, and just said yes, to which he responded, "It's a date then," and I assumed he meant that as a joke-y line because I have friends who have in the past. He picked this restaurant in another town that was relatively fancy that I'd never been to, and I drove him home afterwards, and he told me good night, and that he'd had a great time. Usually we're not that formal with each other, but we weren't really acting that different during dinner, so again I didn't think much of it. Then over the next week or so he started sending hearts and texts and would call me some pet names here and there, which is the first thing that stood out to me a lot. Then earlier this week he grabbed my hand while we were out during his lunch break, and that's when it finally clicked. It really caught me by surprise, and I didn't know how to react, so I tried to play it cool and go along with it. Then yesterday he texted and asked if we were still on for our movie night on Sunday, and I just said, "Yeah, of course," and I'm starting to panic a bit. I grew up pretty conservative, and I guess didn't question my sexuality a lot, even when I got to university, and a lot of other people were. I've always been awkward when it comes to that stuff, and I never really made the first move with any of the girls I've dated. But I've been thinking about it for the last few days, and I've realized I really like him, and all the stuff he's done never made me uncomfortable. Quite the opposite, actually. He's cute, definitely what I would have said is my type, but like a guy version, and it feels different than any friendship I've ever had. Like again, looking back, I definitely haven't been acting super platonic with him, and we've gotten close really fast. And if I'm being honest, if he'd been a girl, I also would have assumed that's where this was going. I guess my issue is, should I tell him next time I see him that I didn't realize we were dating? Should I wait? Does he need to know? I don't want him to feel embarrassed that he assumed or think that I'm using him to figure myself out, but I also don't want to lie. I genuinely want to see where this goes since he makes me really happy. To summarize, I moved to a new town after a bad breakup with a girl, met this guy, thought we were just instantly good friends. I didn't realize he was actually asking me out, then realized it when he held my hand when we went for lunch. I thought about it, and I really like him a lot. Should I tell him I didn't realize we were dating, and that he's the first guy I've ever dated, or should I wait a bit? Not tell him at all. Here's what happened afterwards. So we had our dinner/movie night yesterday, and I was very nervous. Mostly because I was scared that how new it was to me was going to be a deal breaker. But Eric came over, and I think he instantly realized I was acting weird. He didn't say anything while he was helping me cook, but then when we sat down to eat, he almost immediately asked what was up. So I basically said something like, I really like you, and I want to see where this goes, but I want you to know it's very new to me, and I'm not sure you're cool with that. And he asked what exactly was new to me, and I said I'd only dated girls before. Which then led to a conversation where I couldn't avoid telling him that I didn't realize we were dating until that lunch. He actually got really quiet for a few seconds after that, and I was scared he was upset, but then he just laughed. Basically, he thought I'd been flirting with him for quite some time. Looking back, I probably was, just not intentionally. And all of his friends had been saying like, he seems so into you, it's really obvious, he's probably just too shy to make the first move. He even mentioned some other stuff we or I had done that I gotta admit definitely doesn't sound platonic when he retells it. So I can see why they thought that, and ultimately they were right, I guess. And during that lunch he'd apparently thought I was reaching to grab his hand, so he reached out too. Otherwise he probably wouldn't have done it, because he said he's never been good at making the first move physically. He said when he asked me to dinner, that was a huge deal, and his friends had tried to hype him up for a while, and that's probably why I didn't realize that he was asking me out since he was super nervous. Anyway, we ended up talking a lot after dinner. He didn't come out publicly, aside from a few close friends, until a year or so ago either, so he definitely understood that I don't have a lot of experience. He hasn't had a lot of relationships in general, at least not any proper and public ones, since he hadn't come out, and it's a pretty conservative area, so there aren't a lot of guys who are out of the closet here. He actually admitted that he'd even been nervous to talk to me that first time we met since I looked kind of lumberjack. Why? His words, not mine. Though the day we met I think I hadn't shaved in a while, so I don't doubt it. And he also knows rumors travel fast here, especially when someone doesn't really fit in. So I guess he was worried that I'd fit the small-town conservative type or have heard all the gossip. The whole, it's a date thing for example would never happen between two guys who are just friends here. I've definitely noticed the culture, and it's something we talked about too since being out here isn't always easy. So we might try to keep it low-key at first, and mostly tell his friends and some of mine. I could probably ramble on about him and what we talked about for a long time, but to keep it short it was a really nice talk, and we want to take it slow, but we also realize we've basically been half-dating since May, so it felt weird not to make it official. Well, it wasn't so much that she wanted to do what I now know as the daddy/little girl game, and that she actually literally identified as a 4-year-old, age play I think they call it, or that she was clearly still obsessed with her ex, or that after all this coming out on the second date, she proceeded to divulge that she had been attacked many, many times. In graphic detail, it was so excessive that there's no way it was true, but when someone tells you that kind of thing you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. We ended up back at some relative's house, and just as I was about to bounce I realized she was already really drunk, despite only having a couple of drinks. She was a pretty tiny girl though, and then she began to talk about Sweeney Todd, the demon barber of Fleet Street. No, it wasn't any of the previously mentioned things, it was Sweeney Todd that led me through one of the most bizarre experiences of my life. Apparently it was the greatest play ever penned, blubbered out in a grand drunken dissertation that probably couldn't be rivaled by even the greatest booze artists of our time. I admit, I was captivated in some morbid way. I stayed and sipped on my drinks as she went further down a rabbit hole that, as it existed within her, had no bottom. It was like watching someone who wrote their thesis on the thing, but was promptly failed vent about the injustice of it all. And I imagine she would have failed because she handed the thesis into a technical writing class while drunk. This is how discordant and obtuse it all was. By my guess, the only type of person still willing to listen to what was becoming more obviously a compulsion evolved far beyond impulse were strangers. The other people present had expressions like it was happening for the 1000th time, and they were powerless to stop it. And I was powerless to look away. Such a passionate, fervent, elaborate, and frenzied car crash. Then she started singing. And did she ever sing? She fell over regularly, and her words were so slurred, and her physical movement so slothful and blurred, that I knew I was in for a real show. She did the whole play. From beginning to end, every part, each character with their own voice. She was mostly naked by the time it ended. I sat there and cheered her on, and tried to stop her drinking, and stoke the fire pit in the backyard of this stranger's house. She didn't miss a beat, a line, a gesture. Even when I went to the can, the neighbors hollered and the dogs barked, and I was beginning to wonder if I wasn't dreaming or something. I had never before nor since seen someone so in love with a piece of art as this crazy little French girl was. I was almost envious that I didn't feel that way about something. When she finally wrapped up and I told her to take a bow, she toppled over doing just that and proceeded to crawl over to me in my chair and try to initiate a blowjob. I laughed, picked her up, carried her in the house, and dumped her on the couch. Didn't even bother saying goodbye. I knew she wouldn't remember it anyway. I walked back to my truck laughing and contemplating the sheer absurdity of humanity, knowing I'd never see anything like that again. Wherever you are, Michaela, I hope you're doing okay. I hope you found your daddy, and life's a little smoother for you. But it probably isn't. Blessed be the mad ones. I don't even know where to start. My hands are shaking as I type this, and I'm not sure if I even want to post it, but I just need to get it out. I feel like I'm losing my mind, like the last few years of my life weren't even real. I, 32 female, have been married to my husband Jake, 35 male, for 5 years, together for 7. We met at a bar of all places. He wasn't even my type at first, but he was so charming, so easy to talk to. He made me laugh, made me feel safe. It wasn't a crazy love story or anything, but it felt real. He was my best friend, my partner. Or at least, I thought he was. I don't even know how to explain the feeling I've had the past few months. Like, something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. We still got along, still had date nights, still functioned like a normal couple. But it was like he wasn't there anymore. Emotionally, physically. Sex became rare, and when it did happen, it felt robotic, like he was just going through the motions. I asked him about it a few times. He'd always brush it off. Just stress, babe. Work is killing me. I'm just getting older, you know? And I wanted to believe him. I did believe him. Until last Friday. He told me he was going out with some co-workers for drinks. I didn't think anything of it at first, but as the night went on, something just nagged at me. He wasn't texting me like he usually did when he was out. No updates, no on my way home soon text. Just radio silence. And I don't know why, but for the first time in my entire marriage, I did something I had never done before. I opened the Find My iPhone app. I stared at the screen for a long time. He wasn't at a bar. He wasn't anywhere near the part of town he said he'd be in. His location showed a small hotel downtown. My heart started pounding. I wanted to be rational. Maybe he had a work event at the hotel. Maybe someone got too drunk and he was helping them. But deep down I knew. I just knew. I don't even remember driving there. I just remember standing in the lobby, feeling like I was outside of my own body. I walked up to the front desk and God, I don't even know how I got the words out. I asked if my husband checked and I showed here a picture. The woman behind the desk gave me this look, like she knew exactly what was going on. And then she just sighed and said, "Room 214. I swear I almost threw up right there. I took the stairs because I couldn't stand the thought of being trapped in an elevator, alone with my thoughts. Every step felt heavier than the last. My whole body was screaming at me to turn around, to just leave and pretend I never saw that location. But I couldn't. When I got to the door, I knocked. Nothing. Then I heard movement. And then his voice, one moment. The door cracked open, just a sliver, and there he was. Shirtless. Eyes wide. Panicked. And that's when I pushed the door open. There he was. And there was Aaron, his best friend. The one he always said was like a brother to him. The one he spent so much time with. The one who, I suddenly realized, had probably been in his life in a way I never even knew. Aaron was in bed, scrambling for the sheets, looking just as horrified as Jake did. And I just I froze. I wish I could say I screamed at him, that I threw things, that I went full-on crazy wife. But I didn't. I just stood there, staring, feeling the entire foundation of my life collapse under me. Jake said my name, like he was trying to explain. And I just laughed. Not because it was funny. It wasn't. It was the most painful thing I've ever felt in my life. But my body didn't know what else to do. I laughed so hard I thought I was going to choke on it. I had spent some time thinking I was the problem. Thinking I wasn't sexy enough, fun enough for him. And the whole time, I was just his beard. I was his shield, his cover, his excuse to live a lie. When I finally stopped laughing, I looked him right in the eye and said, "You never loved me. You loved what I did for you." He didn't deny it. I turned around and walked out, ignoring his pathetic "wait, please," like I owed him anything. Now I'm sitting here in my apartment, surrounded by pictures of a life that was never real. I feel like I've lost everything. Not just my husband, but the truth. Because what the hell was my marriage, if not a complete and total lie? I don't know where to go from here. I don't even know who I am without him. I just know I can't be this woman anymore. I never thought I'd be in a situation like this. I guess no one does. You don't go into a relationship expecting betrayal. But there I was, staring at my phone, knowing my life was about to change in a way I never saw coming. Sarah and I had been together for 6 years. We weren't just dating, we lived together, had a joint savings account, and were planning a future. Marriage was something we had talked about casually, never with a set date, but we both knew we were headed in that direction. Or at least, I thought we were. She worked in marketing, a demanding job that often had her attending work events, networking functions, and conferences. I trusted her completely. She was always independent, had her own friends, and I never wanted to be the kind of guy who checked in too much. Maybe I should have. The signs were small at first, her phone suddenly getting more privacy settings, more nights out with work friends, a little more distance between us. I chalked it up to stress. I even asked her about it, and she told me I was overthinking, that I needed to relax. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Then, one evening, my friend Josh sent me a message. "Hey man, I don't know if I should be saying this, but I saw Sarah last night. She was with some guy. They were close. Too close." He sent a picture. It wasn't anything explicit, just Sarah leaning into a guy at a bar, laughing, her hand resting on his thigh. Maybe not damning evidence, but definitely not nothing. I felt sick. I told myself there had to be an explanation. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I needed to see for myself. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked her phone while she was in the shower. I hated myself for it, but I needed the truth. And I found it. Messages. Flirty ones. Hidden under a different name in her contacts. Meeting up, sneaking around. She had been sleeping with him for at least 3 months. 3 months of my life where I thought things were just stressful, where I thought we were fine. I didn't confront her immediately. I couldn't. I needed time to process. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I told her we needed to talk. I sat her down, showed her the messages, and asked her to explain. She froze. I could see her mind working, scrambling for a way out. Then the excuses started. It wasn't serious. I never meant to hurt you. I was confused. Then came the guilt trip. You've been so distant lately. I thought maybe you weren't in love with me anymore. I just sat there, listening to her try to rewrite history, trying to make me the reason she did this. I didn't yell. I didn't lose my temper. I just told her to pack a bag and leave. She cried, tried to touch my arm, begged me not to make any rash decisions. But I had already made up my mind. She moved in with a friend. A few weeks later, I started sorting out the logistics, our finances, our apartment lease. She tried to reach out, tried to meet up to talk things through. I refused. There was nothing left to say. I wasn't going to waste my time demanding apologies or trying to understand something I could never make sense of. She made her choice. I made mine. Now, months later, I'm still adjusting to the silence of living alone again, to the shift from we to me. Some days I miss her. Not who she was at the end, but the person I thought she was before. But I know better now. Update for you all. I figured some closure might be useful for others going through something similar. Sarah has tried to reach out more times than I can count. At first, it was desperate apologies, then long-winded explanations, then attempts at nostalgia, sending pictures of old trips, trying to remind me of the good times. We actually ran into each other completely by accident. At all places, the grocery store. I was in the frozen food aisle, just grabbing some basics, when I heard someone call my name. I turned around, and there she was, standing there awkwardly, holding a basket full of items. She looked nervous, hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she should say anything. I gave her a small nod, acknowledging her presence, but said nothing. She took that as an invitation to talk. "Hey, how have you been?" she asked, her voice softer than I remembered. I shrugged. "I've been good." It was the truth. I had been focusing on myself, hitting the gym more, reconnecting with old friends, finally picking up some hobbies I had neglected. I wasn't bitter anymore. Just done. She sighed, shifting on her feet. "I miss you." I just looked at her for a second, then replied, "I don't." That was the end of it. She didn't try to follow me, didn't plead or make a scene. She just stood there as I turned away and walked to the checkout line. That moment made me realize the sight of her didn't stir up any emotions. No anger, no sadness, no nostalgia. Just indifference. And that, more than anything, felt like the biggest win of all. Back in the 90s, I was happily married to my wife, or so I thought. We both worked in the catering industry, myself mainly as a chef, and my wife as a barmaid waitress back. Then it was the norm for us both to work unsocial hours, always working, when everyone else was at play, and for people to move around a lot, so we didn't always work in the same place. Well, my wife had this girlfriend that was always dripping in money, yet she didn't work and always had a man hanging from her arm. We often wondered how she managed it, speculating that it must be drug money or something like that. Well, long story short, my wife found out she was pregnant and had a miscarriage, which floored her, and she had to give up work for a bit, which meant I had to double down with my work, doing more hours. So during this time she started to spend more time with her friend. As they grew closer, often spending the night there, I'd drop her off and pick her up when I finished work. The bills were beginning to mount up with just the one wage coming in, so I took a second job driving a taxi. It was flexible and good, manage it around my main job. Meantime, my wife started using her new makeup, getting dressed up to go to her friends, giving the excuse of "you have seen her. I just want to fit in," which, knowing what girls are like, I paid no attention to this. But my wife now seemed to be having money, just enough to cover the little things that most wouldn't notice. I wasn't home much, working 2 jobs, so I was grateful my wife had a good friend who was always willing to have my wife around as company. I was thinking, I'm putting in the long yards now for a payoff later on with work, getting the bills down, just putting my head down and getting on with things. Obviously, as we didn't see much of each other, our sex life were suffering to the point it was literally non-existent, which was beginning to take a toll on our relationship. Things all came to a head one night. I was out in the taxi. It had been a quiet night until I get a call on the radio for a pickup in a really nice bit of town. I got there, and as instructed, I just hit the horn and stayed in the car. 2 guys, well-dressed, got in the back seat along with my wife's girlfriend between them, and they gave me the address to drop them off. It was her house, so I thought nothing of it. She hadn't noticed it was me driving as the 3 of them started to fool around on the back seat as talking my wife's friend, telling them how much they would enjoy her friend when they met her. Apparently, she's a very high-demand girl, so it was going to cost them extra. Got to the house, and as they got out, one of the guys handed me a 20-pound tip, which I was happy at. I looked across to the door of the house, only to see my wife open the door dressed in only her underwater and high heels. She smiled and hugged her friend, then kissed the guys as they went into the house. I was flabbergasted. Not knowing what to do, I drove around the corner and parked up, just sitting there trying to process what I'd seen. I got out of the car, walked back to the house, crept up to the lounge window, and perked in. What I saw took my breath away. All 4 of them were naked, and my wife was being fucked by the guy who tipped me, and she was putting on quite a show with him. I watched in disbelief for a few minutes, and the guy finished with her and handed her to the other guy, who started fucking her as well. I went back to the car, called in for the night, and went home. In the morning, my wife called me to pick her up. I went and got her, not talking all the way home. When we got into the house, my wife asked me what was up, why I was so quiet. I ignored her for a bit and made some coffee. She didn't stop asking me again. I just said, "I saw you last night. You didn't see me. I was the driver who dropped those guys off to you." She paused for a moment before crumpling to the floor, crying, begging me to forgive her. As I went upstairs and started packing her bags were done, I told her. She begged me to let her explain. I needed to hear this for my own sanity, so let her tell me why she had done it. She explained that her friend and how she got her money was from escort work, and she had convinced my wife to try it. She only did it once to try get some money, so I could cut back my hours, but she found it made her feel something inside, as we haven't been intimate for so long, so she did it again, telling herself this is the last time. But she was hooked. She eventually confessed she'd been working as an escort for 6 months, but it was okay as she'd saved up so much money to pay the bills. I asked her straight there, And then would you ever told me if I hadn't caught her, she just looked at the floor and said, "No, are you going to stop?" "Now, no," was the reply. "It's just sex. I don't love these men. It's just sex with them." That was enough for me. I throw her bags out the front. "Dor will go live with your whore friend then." As I throw her out as well. As far as I'm aware, she did go to her friends. My divorce papers were sent there for her. And as far as I'm aware, she's still there today, both of them in their 50s, still FING for money. As for me, I'm now married to my wife with 2 great kids, and a few grandkids. Life definitely changed that day for me, and I haven't looked back, now owning my own hotel, and business is doing well. A few years ago, my anxiety was high. I was already at a point in my life where I thought I was a little out of it, but that was amplified by a lot when I kept repeatedly hearing noises outside my window. Like every single night, it just wouldn't stop. I would finally get so freaked out I'd go wake my parents up and get them to look outside, but they never found anything. I started to think I was crazy or just subconsciously seeking attention. One morning, my grandfather discovered one of our lawn chairs beneath our bathroom window. It's pretty high up and the bottom pane is fogged, so I'm not sure the chair even helped, but it was left there regardless. The next night, heard sounds again, nothing. The night after, however, we checked outside and discovered something that made my stomach churn. A small stepladder was sitting directly outside of my window, back just enough to allow someone to sit on it, but still see. On my windowsill was a bag of now cold McDonald's, which is just up the street from me. Most of the food was still in there, but still, some fucker had been watching me doing absolutely nothing of interest in my room, without me knowing for I don't know how fucking long. The cops were called, nothing happened. I felt crazier than ever. No one was to be found, but at least we had some evidence that someone that shouldn't be hovering around our house was at my window, watching intently through the blinds, in a space between the 2 curtains. Heard noises the next night. Ran outside, nothing. Earlier in the night, I'd sewn my curtains together, which hopefully made it harder to see in. Apparently it did, because now the fucker had taken to climbing on top of our air conditioning unit. And from there, climbing onto our Herbie/garbage can, then standing on that, so that he could see above where the drapes went. The handprints and shoe prints were left on the lid to prove it. I should also mention that there were now holes in my screen, and I heard these holes be created. He took a stick and sharpened it somehow. We found it outside my window, and was trying to stealthily break away the screen bit by bit. The hole is still there. The next night, I distinctly heard the gravel near my window crunch. There was simply no mistaking my sound. As stealthily as I could, I let out a small moan he surely heard and rolled just out of view, as if I were sleeping, then pressed myself against a wall out of view of the window, very quietly opened my door, and crept down the hall. My heart was pounding. Normally I knock on my parents' door, but I knew the slightest sound would make the bastard bolt, so I quietly opened their door and sneaked in, then informed them that there was, without a single doubt, someone outside my window. They didn't mind the intrusion and got up, got dressed, formulated a plan, and crept to the back door. I ran to the bathroom to stand on the edge of our tub and peek out the window just as the back door was thrown open, and my parents ran outside like morons. And sure enough, they saw him. They started screaming as the man leapt off of the Herbie and bolted down our driveway, which was what I was looking at. They screamed all sorts of horrible things at the tops of their lungs. "You sick motherfucker, I'm gonna fucking kill you," from my dad. "You fucking freak," from my mom. He ended up escaping across the street, hiding behind a house adjacent to us. The balls on this bastard. He kept peeking out at us as we all stood outside, but we wanted to leave him there so the cops could finally nab him. They were called, they came, and they searched, but they never found him. Bastard must have hopped a fence or some shit. Still to this day I hear sounds outside my window, even in the dead of winter, but he's never out there. He might have just been a peeper, but he targeted me specifically, and for months, until he was almost caught. What really pisses me off is that once he lost interest in me because it was too unsafe, he moved on to a house down the street, with 2 little girls. He actually managed to get in through their window, and their dad caught him just standing in the middle of the room, watching them sleep, jacking it, I think. I still don't think he was caught, even then. All I know is that it could have been way worse, but it messed me up. I trust the men in my neighborhood even less now. The men around here stare very blatantly. I've been chased home by one. I've had a guy try to jerk me into his car when I was passing him, telling him no, I didn't need a ride, and to leave me alone. All these years later, I still hear shit outside my window and freak out. It's fucked up. I turn out my lights entirely to exercise. I do my best to avoid the windows when I undress. It just scarred me, even though it wasn't a huge deal. It was my 18th birthday, and as a newly minted adult, I was enjoying my grown-up-ness by getting as drunk as I could. I'm with my friends in this pub in town, and we're gathered round a table. There's maybe 6 of us. A couple of tables over, there's a group of girls, and there's maybe 6 of them. One of them catches my eye when I look over, and she's stunning. Long red hair, bright blue eyes, full pink lips. I look away and carry on drinking, but she keeps catching my eye again and again. We do that thing where you both catch each other looking, then pretend you weren't looking at all whilst doing it even more. Eventually I need another drink, so I get up and head to the bar, and I notice her doing the same. At this point, I notice her body. She's short, but with a great figure. Breasts that are good and round and big, small waist, wide hips, great bum, everything. I'm pretty much fully in lust with this girl, and we've not even met. We get to the bar, and I let her order before me. She gets something like a lemonade, unusual for that pub, but I figure someone's got to be the designated driver, and it's probably her. I order a pint for myself, turn round to head back, and she's there, right behind me. We get to chatting, and she tells me her name's Helena. I make some kind of Shakespeare joke, she laughs, and I'm in. The rest of the night, I talk mostly to her, though it's cool, because the other lads have descended on the group of girls at the other table. The evening wears on, and eventually we get to the, well, are we gonna fuck, or just agree to meet each other again, or fuck off and pretend this never happened stage. We go for the former. We go back to my place, being very careful not to wake my parents up because I'm still shit and live at home, and have a great night. Long story short, we ended up going out for a while, always meeting out somewhere, then heading back to mine. Eventually we drift into actually being a couple, and from there we start to do more couple-y things. And that's when the crazy leaks in. She starts arguing with me about every little thing imaginable, from not saying hello in the right way, to not being there to wake her up at precisely 6 hours, 1 minute, and 9 seconds in the morning, or whatever. Every argument escalates into whatever the fuck she's decided to rant about, and always ends the same way. She threatens to dump me. I coax her back, we kiss, fuck, everyone's happy. After maybe a month and a half of this or so, I get bored of it all. I do the decent thing, and take her out for coffee to a cozy little cafe, tell her in the best way I can that we're not working out, and it's all pretty surprisingly amicable. Except it's not. The phone calls start. Always from a private number, always of crying. At first to my mobile, then to my home phone. Always a private number, always crying. I know she's faking it, because if I never answered the phone, my parents would have a friendly little chat, then hand the phone to me, and immediately it's like Niagara Fall of fucking tears. Then the emails. Weird, ranty emails of gibberish and threats, and pleading to take me back. Hundreds of them. There'd be days when they'd come every 5 minutes, days when there'd be nothing at all. I changed my number to get rid of her, got a whole new mobile number, and we went X-directory with our number. Changed my email too. I still got them for about 6 months after, but eventually they stopped. And that should have been the end of it. Little did I know. I started going online, on various forums, games, etc. On one such forum, I struck up a friendship with a girl on there. I know she was a girl because she showed me pictures of herself with little scribbled, HIOFAB I am random username, and whatever, which is pretty conclusive as evidence goes. We had a great time chatting and whatever, and we had so much in common, it was completely insane. Like, not only did she like the same things I did, but she was this utterly stunning little brunette, like a proper English rose. Anyway, eventually we started going out, having little Skype chats, though she never went on cam, which I was cool with because I looked like shit a lot of the time. Things started out well, but over time, she got a bit too clingy for my liking. She'd ask where I'd been if I was a minute late, or got jealous if she'd seen a picture of me on Facebook with another girl. She got upset at the slightest thing, or angry if I mentioned another girl's name, even if it was, oh, Louise said she liked my work, when Louise was the lecturer for my course. Eventually I got pissed off, dumped her, and we had a nice clean break. I avoided those forums, changed my Skype, because, remember, I'd had bad times with my previous ex and communication stuff. And that was that. Not learning my lesson at all, I went on different forums, found another girl, and got to know her too. This one was a tan blonde, all boobs and legs and sexy as fuck Australian accent. She liked most of the same things I did, with enough difference that we could teach each other how to do things, how to appreciate things, how to like things. She was laid back, too. And compared to the latest ex, she was a breath of fresh air. If I got on Skype half an hour later than I'd said I would, she was cool with it. If I spent a conversation talking about my lecturer, using her name every dozen words, she'd bitch along with me, making me laugh, making me smile, making me love. Eventually, I talked of meeting her, though it was a long way from England to Sydney, and expensive as anything. I was willing to fly to meet her, because I wanted to see her face to face, to see the places she'd told me about, to go to the clubs and bars and restaurants she told me she loved. I wanted to hold her in my arms and kiss her, and actually have a proper girlfriend again. She immediately broke up with me, saying I'd only be disappointed with the reality. Then came the latest girl. She was Canadian, brunette, something of a rock chick, completely different to my usual kind of girl. We met on some chat site I used when I was bored, got talking, swapped details, etc. She introduced me to a ton of music I'd never even considered listening to, and I did the same for her. If I complained about something, she told me to man the fuck up. If I turned up late, she told me it was fine because time is something the man makes us believe in. She was the coolest fucking girl I'd ever known. Again we dated on Skype and whatever. Again we talked about meeting. Again she broke up with me, saying that it had all just been in fun or whatever. It was cool. It was amicable and fine, and that was that. All this happened over a couple of years, with me being with each girl anywhere between 4 and 6 months, and my between times being maybe 1 to 3 months. I was a quick worker, and fuck the rebound shit. Anyway, I came back to my hometown for the holiday. I think it was reading week or something, and fuck being on campus then. I was wandering along the road, when who should I see but Psycho Girl. Rather than avoiding her, I carried on walking. She came up to me, said she had something to tell me, and we needed to talk desperately. I made all kinds of excuses, but each one she batted aside until she wore me down. We went to the pub, and she told me something that basically terrified me. She hadn't wanted to give up on me, so she'd used what she knew of me to find places I'd go online. She'd made different accounts, lots of different accounts, in the hopes that she'd find me, so she could talk to me, and try and win me back. Except she'd made fake accounts, so I wouldn't immediately ignore her. See where this is going? Yep. Every one of the girls I'd dated had been her, using pictures of friends, using fake accents, pretending to not know things she knew. She'd followed me across at least a dozen different websites, stalked me across hundreds of posts and threads, and all the time had made me believe I was talking to completely different people. I didn't date anyone for a couple of years after that. I don't know what came of her. After that, she sort of disappeared from my life, and I haven't seen her since. I went out briefly with a couple of other girls, but only ones I'd met face to face, who didn't look anything like her at all. I don't know if she still follows me about online, or if she does, if she knows about this account. But if you're looking at this, hi Helena. I once had ongoing elusive food poisoning that lasted for days, and towards the end of its cycle, I went for a lengthy walk on the beach near my home in the desperate hope that I could get some fresh air without shitting myself in front of the town's nightlife. That night I met a group of girls who were obviously drunk and crowding around one of their cars. They wolf whistled as I passed the car, and to my surprise I ended up hitting it off pretty well with one of the girls, Alyssa. We exchanged numbers, and I went home proud of my achievement. That night I started getting a flourish of random texts from her, telling me how hot I looked and that I seemed to be boyfriend material. I told her that I was interested too, and that we'd have to meet up again soon. This was back in the day that I was a poor studying uni student, Australia, so I arranged to meet her the following weekend after I'd knocked over my study commitments. She was reluctant to wait that long, and over the course of the week she texted me endlessly, increasingly more desperate ploys to see me earlier. I remember one day on lunch my uni friends, and I actually counted the amount of texts I'd received from her so far that day. It was around 90. They were a mix of really generic things like, "Miss you to come to mine now, I want to see you our sexy face now." I hardly responded to any of them, if she was lucky maybe 1 in 20. The relevant texts. Now being a 20-something-year-old male, my obvious apprehension regarding Alyssa was mixed with a very primal, groin-stirring curiosity. She was so needy, so pushy. Would she be wild in the sack? Would be balance out and make a fun, feisty girlfriend? So I followed through with our original plans and met her that weekend. I picked her up and we saw a movie at the cinema. After not too long I observed that her text message, demeanor didn't match her face-to-face personality at all. She was timid, quiet, a little quizzical, but nothing like the love-hungry, horny, pushy crazy girl I'd spent the last week fighting myself over. I was beginning to ease up after the movie, something just clicked. She was just a bit bland for me. I decided that she wasn't for me, and that I was cool with that. She made small chit-chat, but wasn't overbearing or energy draining like I'd expected. So I took her back to my place, and we put a horror flick on. Nothing happened throughout the whole movie. No hand touching, no kissing, no moving closer or bed wrestling. I had decided that I must have been somehow thrown in the friend zone. So I took her back to her place. We were in idle out the front of her house, at maybe 11:30 p.m., and I told her it was fun hanging out, and that we might do it again sometime. I considered the date a failure, and was keen to just get out of there. She opens the door to leave, and suddenly turns around and lunges onto me, practically eating my face, sucking my lips and feeling me up through my jeans. I stopped her after a little while. Obviously I was prepared to give it a shot, but it just felt weird. She was noticeably hurt, and slammed the door, and I drove away. By the time I reached my place, I'd received a number of texts, a chain of insults that ranged from, "Whatever, I don't want you anyway," to "fuck you asshole." I replied diplomatically once or twice, to be shut down by another hail of ill-prepared insults. These texts continued for days and days, and even well after I'd stopped texting back I'd receive the occasional "asshole" out of the blue. My friends thought it was hilarious. Another story for you. I had a pretty bad breakup with a girl who at the time I believed I was in love with, so naturally I go for a rebound in the form of this cute Australian girl. We go out for like a month or so before I decide it's not working out. I end things. She didn't like this though, and kinda refused to acknowledge the breakup. Eventually I had to hack her Bebo account, this was a while ago, and dump myself via email, which she surprisingly fell for. Nearly a year later, I was in another relationship with an absolutely beautiful girl. Smart, funny, gorgeous, and everything that I believed was too much for me. However, she only frequents my city during the holidays, so a lot of our relationship was based online. Despite this, we spend a lot of time online. It's a beautiful online relationship. However, a month or so later I come online again. My name in between two little heart emoticons is missing, and she's off with me. In the end it emerged that I had been online frequently telling her that I was severely depressed due to the fact that my first girlfriend died in 9/11. Let me clarify something quickly. I'm from Plymouth, which is in England. Plymouth has an airport, the furthest it goes is London. I was 11 during 9/11, and awful with girls. Despite this, apparently my first love had gotten on a plane in Plymouth, and that plane flew over to New York and caused one of the biggest tragedies of all time. From Plymouth, I was bewildered that she believed that I said this. It then hit me. Crazy Australian ex knew my MSN details for some reason. Of course the relationship between me and the beautiful girl ended. She didn't know who was the real me after this whole affair. Still, 7 years later, it makes for a baffling story. Went out with a few friends to grab some wings and beer after a long week of work. One of my buddies GFs who I've known for years shows up with a few friends. Mostly people I've met before, but one chick I haven't met. Extremely good looking, 5'9" blonde. Honestly, thought she would probably be a ditz by looking at her, but she wasn't at all. We instantly hit it off, and she starts talking about some sitcoms I've been obsessed with lately that aren't too popular among my group of friends, Larry Sanders and News Radio. Takes one sniff of my scotch and tells me what it is cracking these big jokes and making everyone we were with piss their pants. Honestly, chick was awesome. Next thing I know, we're headed back to my place both extremely drunk. So I have no clue what's happening at all. We finally get to my apartment. She dashes for my kitchen, and next thing I know she's cranking out omelets. Then all of a sudden, she sees my comp and throws on some stand-up, which was beyond hysterical. So I'm just thinking holy ____ this chick is amazing. After that we watched stand-up for about an hour and ate this breakfast she cooked at 3 a.m. and then she leaves with just a big hug. Next day, I wake up with the hangover from hell. The type of hangover that as soon as you open your eyes you know you're screwed. Stumble into my shower, and in the haze of the water over my head I keep hearing my phone go off. Don't think anything of it. Next thing I know my apartment buzzer goes off. Still don't think anything of it. Then both keep going off. I decide to check my apartment buzzer first. I hear a female voice. Why aren't you picking up my calls? I ask who is it? It's the chick from last night. I then look at my phone and see 17 missed calls from a number I don't know. I call it back, it's her. I buzz her in and she comes upstairs and I'm assuming she just left something here. But she said, "You said you were free today, thought we could hang out." I'm thinking to myself, did I? So I just go along with it. We talk for a while about a bunch of random stuff, then watch some TV. I then tell her I have a bunch of errands to do, and I think I want to take a nap, assuming she'd leave. She said, "Oh cool, I'll come with you," so literally came with me to get a haircut, pick up my dry cleaning, go food shopping. And throughout all of this she's borderline silent, completely different than the night before. We then finally get back to my place, and then she says she's tired and going to take a nap. I'm assuming she'd leave, but nope, she crashes on my couch. I then decide to take a nap and try and process all of this. I wake up and she's staring at me. I realize it's been almost a 3-hour nap. She says to me, "You're beautiful when you sleep." I start nervously laughing, and then get up and head to my bathroom to throw some water on my face. I go back to my living room and she's made mac and cheese with cold cuts in it. Literally my favorite meal. I didn't remember telling her this, and I asked her how she knew. She called my best friend, who she knows, and asked. I'm thinking, okay, this is creepy, but kinda awesome. She finally leaves after another movie, with just a peck on the cheek. Next AM, I hear my door open. I immediately think it's a break and enter, as the only people who have my keys are my parents. And I grab my lacrosse stick under my bed and wait in my bedroom. I peek out from a crack in my door to look. It's her. I walk out and ask her how she got in. She explained to me she grabbed my keys and had a copy made down the block when I was napping yesterday. So I didn't have to do it for her. I then see she has a huge suitcase next to her, and she unzips and starts unpacking. Well, if we're going out, I'm leaving some stuff here. I say, "Whoa, I think we're taking this a little too quick." She immediately bursts into tears and starts screaming at me. "I am perfect for you," over and over again, packs up, and then runs out of my apartment slamming doors. I have no clue what's going on or where my keys are. I try to block the whole weekend out of my head, and then the next day I wake up to go to work. She's outside of my apartment at 6:30 a.m. waiting for me. I'm freaked out and try and talk to her. She barely says a word besides, "I'm sorry." We walk to the end of my block, and then she jumps in a cab without a word. Didn't hear from her at all Monday. I give a mutual friend a call and tell her what happened over the weekend, and she was shocked and said this chick isn't like this at all. Tuesday rolls around. I have 5 missed calls at work from a number I didn't know. It's her calling from her work line. Kept leaving messages to call her back. Finally call her back, and she's just breathing on the other line. Really freaked out by this and say, maybe it's best we don't talk to each other anymore. I then hear her cry and she hangs up. I'm thinking, okay, this is finally done with. I go to a friend's birthday that Friday. She's there. My best friend comes up to me and said, "Hey, I didn't know you were going out with _______." Well, that was news to me. I had no idea either. Asked him how/why did he hear this. Pointed right at the chick, and she was there, and she waved at me and winked. He said she was telling everyone that night she thinks you're gonna get married to each other. I'm beyond freaked out. I tell my buddy everything that happened, and we both decided to leave and told my friend whose birthday it was we'll take him out for drinks another day. I go home that night. She's sitting on my couch. She immediately yells at me, "Why did you tell people we weren't going out?" I ask her to leave and pull out my phone and told her I was going to text the cops. She cries and then leaves without saying a word. Immediately called our mutual friend and told her what happened, and she's freaked out for me. She calls the insane chick's parents. Finds out this happened one other time in college. She had a stalking problem with a guy. Said her parents know she still calls him from time to time. Next day I changed my locks. Haven't heard from her in about 2 weeks now. Scared she'll pop up out of nowhere again. A couple weeks ago I decided I wanted to surprise my wife with a kid-free night out. My parents live about an hour and a half away from us, and I arranged for the kids to stay with them for the weekend. Usually when I go to my parents I am gone until later in the evening. We spend all day there and leave around dinner time. This time I was dropping the kids off and immediately going home, so I could surprise my wife, and we could go out as soon as possible. I had made reservations at a nice restaurant, and was hoping to go to a few places for some drinks first. I left at 8:30, and was back in our housing plan before 12:30. As I pulled onto my street, I saw a truck parked in front of my house. I did not recognize it. I assumed it was someone seeing the neighbors, though, because it's not that unusual for someone to park in front of our house. I parked a few houses away thinking I would sneak into the house and surprise my wife instead of pulling in the driveway and going in the garage. I went in through a basement door. I was as quiet as possible, but as soon as I walked in I heard her making sounds from the floor above. When I first heard it, I thought she was just by herself, maybe having some personal time. I didn't want to interrupt her privacy and embarrass her, so I was going to go back to my car and just go in the garage so she would know I was home. Then I heard a man's voice. I immediately felt sick. My heart felt like it was going to explode out of my chest. It is hard to describe how I felt in this moment. I decided to go upstairs. I had no desire to confront them. I just wanted to see what was going on. I moved slowly and quietly and went up the stairs. The door was halfway open. The kitchen was empty, but I could tell they were in the living room. It was obvious what was going on at this point by the sounds. There was no way for me to look in the living room without them seeing me. I pulled out my phone and opened my camera app. I put my phone just around the corner of a wall. This part is so hard to write. I could see my wife with a man I didn't recognize. I won't go into detail on what they were doing, but I think you can figure it out. I started recording it. I was thinking that I needed a record of it for whatever I decided to do in the future. I just stood there in my kitchen, watching this all unfold on my phone screen. I felt like I could just scream at any moment, but for some reason I just froze completely. This went on for several minutes. She finally jumped off of him and made a comment about going to the bedroom, and they went upstairs. She even made a comment about how much time they had left. I walked into the living room and found the guy's pants. I took his wallet out and took pictures of his driver's license. I know his name and his address now. I've never met him. I have no idea how my wife knows him. I left the house the same way I entered. I went back to my car and cried like the pathetic man I am. I decided to watch the video to make sure it recorded. I watched it all. I'll spare the details, but I sat in my car for at least half an hour. I couldn't drive to my parents and get the kids as I would have to explain why. I decided that I would pull in the driveway, open the garage, and just pretend like I was there to surprise her. I took my time getting into the house. I made a lot of noise. When I saw her, she was very flustered, asking me why I was home, etc. She was in a robe and said she was just getting ready for a bath. I told her about my plans, and she seemed excited. She poured us both a glass of wine and said we should pre-game before getting ready. I don't think I talked much really. She took me into the living room. I'm not proud of what I let happen. I could faintly see the guy sneaking downstairs and going to the basement stairs, but I didn't say or do anything. I just let my wife continue doing what she was doing to me. Since that day, I have watched the video of her repeatedly. I can't bring myself to make any decisions on what I should do next. She seems to know something is wrong with me, because she's asked a few times if I'm okay. I feel worthless, and every time I hit a low point, I watch that video again. I feel like I've watched it at least 10 times a day since I caught them. 10-day later update for you. I stopped watching the video after reading all the comments on my first post. It has helped clear my mind and allowed me to focus on next steps. This has allowed me to be mostly back to my normal self for both my kids and my job. I have gone through my wife's phone and found nothing. I searched the guy's name from the driver's license. I've figured out how they met. He's a landscaper. She was calling some a few months ago to clean up our yard and ended up getting some mulching and cleanup done. I've driven past his house many times. I think he is single as I couldn't find any records of other people living at that address. I've only seen a truck parked in the driveway when I have driven by. I have been avoiding my wife after the kids are in bed to try to limit one-on-one time. I don't want any awkward conversations, and I also don't want to have sex. I have mostly been successful with this, but did slip up one night when I had a little too much to drink. I hated myself for it the next day. I don't believe she has seen him since the day I caught them. I've been paying attention anytime she's gone. I obviously can't track her 100%. I've read about Apple AirTags, but I use Android. I'm guessing any app one would put on her phone may be discovered. I have installed a doorbell camera on our house though, so I can always see the street. When I did this, my wife didn't say anything. We continue to do things as a family as we normally would. I have done my best to not let her know what I know, and to continue to be a good dad to my kids. The weird thing I'm dealing with now is that she's planned a night out with a friend for drinks. It's a friend from work, so I don't know her at all, and I'm not connected with this person on social media. When she told me, I made up some excuse about work and said I couldn't watch the kids. She ended up getting our neighbor to agree to babysit. Now I'm debating if I should follow her to really see if she's meeting her friend or the guy. It seems like I'm heading towards a confrontation, either way, when I just want everything to go back to normal. I'm going to leave my house soon and pretend to be going to work. I'll probably just go to a bar to kill time until I can drive by the place she's supposed to be going to. I'm filled with fucking dread about all of this. On the night when she was going out with her friend, I still pretended I had work and left the house after the babysitter arrived. I went to a bar and had a few drinks. Then I drove over to the restaurant she said she was going to. I saw her car in the parking lot. I'm not going to lie, I was on edge and incredibly nervous despite the drinks earlier. I was so worried I would walk in and see her with that guy. I was hoping to sneak in and get a look without being seen, but that failed miserably. She saw me as soon as I walked in the door. She was with her friend and not the guy. We had the "what are you doing here? Thought you were working" expected conversation. I told her work ended early, so I wanted to stop by to say hi since we had a babysitter. I left after a couple drinks and went home to relieve the sitter. So many of you have commented on my last post that I need to confront her, and I decided in that moment that I would. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I got the kids to bed and waited for her to come home. I watched the video again to remind myself of what happened. When she got home, she was surprised I was still up and apparently could tell from the way I looked that something was wrong. I poured it all out on her. It probably wasn't fair of me. I didn't even let her sit down. I told her everything. I played part of the video to show her what I saw. I called her some harsh names, said she ruined our lives. In that moment, I was incredibly angry. She was very upset, heavily crying and shaking. She told me how terrible she felt about everything that happened. I told her she had to tell me everything that happened with that guy, and she laid it all out. She cheated on me twice with him. After the time I saw them, she cut things off because she knew it was wrong and she loves me. I asked her for proof, but she said she had already deleted and blocked him on her phone, Facebook, and Instagram. She did tell me that he is single and knew she was married. She asked me to delete the video, but I refused. She asked me why, and I really didn't have a reason other than I feel I need to hold on to it for now. She got a little angry at that and asked if I was keeping it to watch again. It was very late at this point, so we decided to go to bed and talk more the next day when we had more time to think. She continued to apologize repeatedly for what she did. We slept separately that night. Over the next few days, things between us seemed better. I felt some relief that it was all out in the open now. We have continued to talk, and it feels like we are on a path of staying together and moving past this. I have made it clear that she is never to see or talk to that guy again. While things feel like they are improving, I am still struggling to trust her. Worse yet is that I have a trip coming up for work, and I'll be gone for a few days. I've told her that I am not comfortable with leaving right now, but I can't skip this trip. My boss made it clear that I'm needed. She said I could put cameras up in the house to keep an eye on her if it would make me feel better. Sadly, I may do that. I'll be gone for at least 3 days. Overall, things are okay. Kids are oblivious that anything is going on, and it seems that slowly my wife and I will eventually get back to normal. I hope so at least. I'm a little ashamed to admit that I have watched the video a few times since all of this. I'm thinking that I should probably delete it, so it's gone from my life. I don't know what's wrong with me. Me, 40 male, and my wife, 37 female, have been married for 10 years, and we recently celebrated our anniversary. We have 2 wonderful kids together. Since the beginning of the year, things have been off between us. She's been acting strangely since the beginning of the year, irritable, avoiding me, and we haven't been intimate much. Some days she's happy, some others fully irritated. Sometimes she's a great mother to our kids. Some other times she wishes they had never been born. Recently, I had to go to the urologist for a urinary tract infection, and the test suggested it might be an STD. This was a huge shock because I've never been with anyone other than my wife since we started dating. Right now, she's away at a so-called business seminar, of which I talked about in a different post. She has been keeping diaries for over a decade, and out of desperation, I read them for the first time ever. It turns out she's been having multiple sexual partners for the past 2 years. In particular, there was one affair that lasted over a year, and it seems part of her irritability was due to her lover moving on to someone else. I also discovered she has a hidden Tinder account too, and been meeting with other men regularly. I am devastated beyond words. I feel lost and unsure of what to do, especially since we have 2 little kids who mean the world to me. I need some advice on how to handle this situation. Should I confront her immediately? Should I consult a lawyer first? How do I even begin to process this betrayal and protect my kids through all of this? As everyone's suggesting, I'll try to consult discreetly with a lawyer ASAP, gather as much evidence as I can, get the STD treated, and as painful as it is, perform paternity tests on my kids. To be honest, I'm a complete mess right now and cannot think properly. All kinds of thoughts are crossing my mind. Part of me still loves her and wants to forgive her. The other is just full of disgust and hatred, and wishes I've never even met her at all. I wish I could just disappear right now. After my last post, my in-laws kindly offered to look after the kids while my wife was away at her seminar. They remain unaware of the turmoil I've been experiencing. I used this time to go through her diaries and take pictures of their contents. Each entry felt like a stab in the back, leaving me in a state of shock and disbelief. I just don't recognize anymore the person I thought I knew and loved for over a decade. To avoid going into too much detail, the revelations in the diaries would make any movie or TV series I've ever seen pale in comparison. She has been involved with at least 6 different men over the past 2 years. These affairs occurred not only during her so-called seminars, but also during short business trips, dinners, and other supposed work-related events. Meanwhile, I was at home, taking care of the kids and naively believing I was supporting her career. Some entries vividly describe how great these encounters were for her, all while expressing gratitude towards me for being a devoted husband and father, without a single trace of remorse. This lack of guilt and the extent of her deception make me question her emotional and mental state. While reading through the diaries, I felt an overwhelming sense of despair and was seriously contemplating suicide. In the end, I sought refuge with friends for a few days, as I felt I couldn't be alone. Otherwise, I'd do something that could never be taken back. They really supported me a lot during this time and helped me get in contact with a therapist. I'm now taking regular therapy sessions once per week. They also helped me in getting in touch with lawyers specializing in divorce. I'm also getting treatment for my STD as well. Returning home after picking up the kids from my in-laws was an emotionally devastating experience. I couldn't bring myself to smile at all. At some point, while contemplating all the possible ways I could end my life, my daughter just looked at me and saw my face. Without saying a word, she just came over and wrapped her arms around me. At that moment, I broke down, held her tightly, and burst into tears in front of her. She's my sweet angel, and the shame of having considered leaving my kids to suffer under their mother's disdain was almost too much to bear. For the first few weeks after finding out, I could barely sleep at all and had to depend on sleeping pills just to get through the nights. My motivation was at an all-time low, affecting both my home life and my work. I forced myself to continue exercising and found out it was the only thing that actually made me feel better during this time. To whoever said in the previous post that I shouldn't give up on doing exercise, thank you. You may have just saved my life. The stress intensified after my wife returned from her trip. Initially, it took all my energy to hide my disgust at her and the knowledge I had gained about her actions. I've somewhat got used to this now, but it remains emotionally draining. She did notice that something was off, but still appears to believe that I am entirely unaware of what has transpired. Her lack of shame is staggering. Just recently, she asked me to buy her the expensive gift I promised her for our 10-year anniversary, for which I made an excuse to not buy yet, despite her going into another business trip just the day after our anniversary, which was described in extremely painful detail in her diaries. To make matters worse, she was even arranging to meet her latest partner on the day of my birthday. Nowadays I've started to feel a lot better, thanks to exercise and therapy. I had never been to a therapist before in my life, and to be honest, I am regretting not having done it sooner. Despite my wife betraying me in the worst possible way, part of me still thought that maybe all of this was my fault. Maybe if I had done this, if I had put more effort into that. I blamed myself for a lot of things. My therapist helped me see through it that, while I could have done some things differently in the end, I cannot be held responsible for the actions she chose to take, and no one deserves to be betrayed in the way I was. If I'm at fault for anything, it's for blaming myself for everything, always putting her needs ahead of my own, and trusting her unconditionally without question. While it was extremely hard for me to balance work and looking after the kids alone every time she went on any of these trips, I always let her go after convincing myself that I was doing it for her, to support her business, to let her relieve stress from being at home, that this is what a supportive husband would do, and that if maybe I had a better job or made her happier, she wouldn't feel the need to escape from home. I'd be lying if I said I'm not depressed anymore, but I'm certainly doing much better these days. Nowadays, I feel more rage rather than sadness, and it is the rage that's keeping me going. My therapist advised me to channel this rage into the things I do, which has worked surprisingly well. I talked with 2 law firms about my situation, and was advised to collect more evidence, which I've been devoting myself to for the past few weeks. I've finished digitizing all of her diaries from the past 2 years, which were quite a lot. I got access to her computer and found just way too many photos, chat conversations, and documents to help my case. She's been posting all of her adventures into a very distorted private group in Facebook, to which I've also taken plenty of screenshots of. I've compiled a list of all of her sexual partners in the diaries, and have been identifying them one by one on social media, etc. I've gathered everything I could on her current sexual partners, and managed to figure out where they live and/or work. Now I'm debating whether I should confront them or not. The things I've read in these diaries are so bizarre that I thought maybe she was just writing material for some sort of twisted novel. That is, until I found all the other stuff in her computer, etc. Maybe I'm broken myself as well, but a part of me is actually enjoying this process of gathering all these tiny pieces of evidence and information, cross-referencing them with her diaries, and finding everything I can about her and her lovers. Part of me wants to see her burn on social media by posting directly everything I've found out, since a big part of her business is centered around social media. But I'm refraining myself from doing so since this would also affect both me and the kids, as well as her parents, who have been nothing but kind to me since we got married. I'm also not sure if I should bring this to light to her parents as well, since this will probably devastate them. I'm planning on confronting her after talking further with the lawyers about how to make sure to gain custody of my kids. The country I live in has a rather unfair tendency of granting custody to the mother, even if she's unfit for it, setting the terms of the divorce and child support. A few weeks ago I was in full despair and had no idea what to do nor how to approach the situation. Nowadays, I feel that little by little I'm digging myself out of this hole I've been thrown into. Sorry if I don't respond to all your comments. Right now, my full attention is devoted to protecting my kids. Not being big in the club, party, or dance scene, I tend to use online sites to get dates. Part of the problem is since I live in the middle of nowhere, every person I'd even consider dating is at least an hour drive away. Anyway, onto the story. So I met the girl on the online site. Her profile was nice. Her pictures were neat. She had a little extra meat to her, but I'm perfectly alright with that. We started messaging, found out she was a gamer, she liked science-wise stuff, had a quirky sense of humor, and we messaged several times a day for about a month. When we finally decided to meet up, we decided on going to a fancy Asian restaurant that was halfway, so neither one of us needed to drive too far, which was my idea because I like being practical, especially when I was having job trouble at the moment. Well, when I arrived, I noticed a few details. Her pictures did not do her justice, namely that she was easily about 350 to 400 pounds plus. She was wearing a skimpy outfit that had her fat rolls pouring over the edges. She had high heels on which I could not comprehend how they functioned on account of the law of physics. She must not have practiced putting makeup on in a long time, because she looked similar to a clown. And when she spoke, oh God. I understand everyone has their way of speaking. I know of accents, speech impediments, and vernacular, but she spoke in a way similar to Harold Green from the Red Green Show. Whatever, this is all superficial, and not being one to judge too harshly, and I am not one to turn down a potential friend. I decided to just go with it, knowing I had no interest in pursuing anything beyond friendship. Sorry, not a chubby chaser. So we go in, and the first thing I notice is when the ladies at front see her, their eyes go wide. They look at each other and begin to speak rapidly in Cantonese/Mandarin before the one at the desk greets us and takes us to our seats with only one menu. That was a red flag because my date didn't have one herself. Our conversations weren't anywhere near as complex or interesting as they were online, which was another flag because she seemed to not grasp the basic topics we covered, such as games, World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, gardening, or even local politics. I would chalk it up as anxiety, but no, she had no trouble talking. She just had no idea about any of these things. Then she decided to start talking about sex. Yeah, no, I don't mind talking about anything really, but I don't want to hear about the amount of sex you've had, how you like your sex, what your last boyfriend did to you, your masturbation techniques, your sex toys, and just what you want to do to me. Not only is that rather inappropriate first date conversation topic, also EW. Finally, to save me from a topic that churned my stomach, the food arrived. And I saw just why she didn't need a menu. She pretty much ordered the entire goddamn thing plus several alcoholic beverages versus my soup, steamed rice, and Hunan pork dish. She proceeded to just a bit of everything, shove it on her plate, and then shove it in her mouth, showing the table manners of a hyperactive bonobo, all while trying to keep up the previous topic of conversation that I constantly tried to deviate from to something, anything, that wasn't an insult to my senses, but to no avail. The night continued in this disgusting, sauce-covered trend for a few hours until she had basically eaten everything she ordered and had some of mine as well. The bill came to a little over $200, which I, of course, had to cover because she magically forgot any of her money. Sorry if it seems rude, but if someone wants to get some extremely expensive stuff and I inform them beforehand that I don't have a lot of money, I expect them to chip in even a little bit. On our way out, she grabbed my arm, tried to pull me close, and whispered how she wanted me, and wanted me to come back to her place. I placed my hand on hers, smiled gently, and said no. Now please let go of my arm. Luckily she did, and so I gave her an extremely awkward hug, told her I was going home, and promptly jumped in my car and got the hell out of there. Last message I got from her, about an hour after I got home, was asking why I didn't find her attractive, and why I was such a pansy to not fuck her on the first date. I simply said, I would have nothing against continuing our conversations online, but I don't think we had much chemistry. I broke up with my ex-partner about 7 months ago. He was pressuring me into an open relationship, and I wasn't comfortable with it. But it turned out he had already opened the relationship years before without my permission, so to speak. I think he was trying to get me to be okay with it, because he had become part of a kink community, and going to weekend-long kink events would have been harder to hide than random hookups. So it was the worst of both worlds. At least commit to the web of lies, you dingus. It makes me sad because if he'd been honest with me from the beginning, we might have been able to break up amicably and stay friends. I don't have a problem with polyamory or kink communities. I just didn't want to get involved myself. Anyway, I found out that he got into a brief relationship with one of the girls he cheated on me with. It was someone we were both friends with, but it turned out she was mega obsessed with him. Like Jodi Arias would probably tell her to calm down for a sec. That kind of obsessed. A mutual friend told me that once I left she started emulating my style and personality. When we were still talking, she would conveniently like everything I liked, read everything I was reading, etc. I thought it was because she was a bit socially awkward, and this was her way of trying to be friends. Now she dresses like me, talks like me, uses all the same makeup and fragrances as me. It's like seeing my twin from the mirror universe. It was almost like she was setting herself up as my replacement. Then my ex met someone else, someone who is nothing like me, thankfully, and broke up with Jodi, and she isn't taking it well. It's really none of my business anymore, but I have been eating my popcorn and having a good laugh at their expense. Didn't happen today, but quite a while ago. Just heard this Carl Pilkington thing about something similar, and remembered this. Anyhow, back then, I was feeling a bit lonely and was going through a bit of a dry spell. I matched with a few bots and generally uninteresting people, some of whom were so dumb, I actually felt like doing anything sexual with them might be considered statutory rape. At some point, however, I matched up with this incredibly stunning woman, who definitely piqued my interest, for she was both beautiful and intelligent. She also had a great speaking voice, and I was definitely keen on seeing how far this could go. Maybe even relationship material, who knows? I discovered that she was really into yoga and everything else that comes with a yogi's lifestyle. The only reason that this is worth mentioning is because she thought I looked like I was into yoga as well, but I was not, although at the time I was seriously considering giving it a shot. We go on back and forth mostly about yoga and her lifestyle, which was fascinating to me. She would constantly make remarks about how impressed she was that I never asked her anything sexual, and told me all of her horror stories with other dudes. The reality is, I find it really weird and awkward trying to ask girls for sexual favors on the internet. I don't know why, but I'm far smoother with this sort of thing in person. Either way, we set a date to meet, and all was well. If anything sexual were to happen, it would be then. 2 days before we were set to meet, completely out of the blue, she sends me a photo of her lying in her underwear, with a bit of a tease situation going on. Then she sends me a video of her lying on her tummy. Being the awkward F I was, I had no idea how to react to that message and thought that she'd shown me some, so I shall do the same. I do a similar thing in photo form, showing her a bit of my behind mostly as a joke, but secretly hoping she'd enjoy that and send some more, or maybe get a looking forward to meeting you thing. Without a word, she blocks me off of everything, and that was the end of that. So to sum up, I meet someone cool on Tinder and plan to meet her. She showed me her ass 2 days prior. I felt compelled to do the same and never heard back from them anymore. I'm glad this was amusing to many of you. It's cool to see that all the dudes think this is a huge no-no, but the girls totally dig my response. It's quite an interesting twist, I have to say. Just wanted to clarify a few things. I did send her a compliment, and she responded to the compliment. The fuck up was really me feeling weird afterwards for not sending something back. Keep in mind, I was completely new to this online dating malarkey. It was definitely meant for me because of the above, but also, she sent me a voice note on WhatsApp saying something about them being a little gift. I'm also fairly certain she was a real person. We spoke on the phone a few times and sent each other photos of us doing the same stuff. Like if I said I was going shopping, she'd send me a cute photo of her unpacking her groceries or whatever. Also again, this happened a long time ago. I'm quite happily married at the moment, so I'm not depressed because she didn't want my dick. Was I confused? Sure, but I moved on fairly quick. You can stop sending me aggro PMs about being a bitch for still hanging on to this thing. It's just a funny story. Enjoy it, or check out something else. I met Danielle on a dating app, and we immediately hit it off. Conversation was super easy for us, so we swapped numbers and spent the next 2 weeks texting and talking on the phone. I explained early on that I want to take my time, because not only am I looking for something serious, but also have work commitments the next few months. I work in tech product sales, which can be very busy, and also involve me leaving the city for a few days at a time. She said she understood, and was also looking for something long-term. Great. We met the weekend before Valentine's, and had a nice restaurant date following by dessert and coffee. We finished with a kiss, and I walked her back to her car. It was definitely the best date I've been on since my last relationship. The next day I called her to say I was looking forward to seeing her again, and would plan something when I get back. I live in a major North American city, and from the 15th to 17th I was booked 3 hours away for on-site client meetings. I told her about this and let her know we'd keep in touch. On the Friday I'm due to get back, I get a message from a close female friend asking who I pissed off. I have no clue what she's talking about. She sends me a screenshot of my photo on what looks like a FB page, and tells me it's a private group where women call out men for cheating. It's called Are We Dating the Same Guy? And this particular group is just for people from my city. In the screenshot, multiple people are posting under my picture with mostly harmless comments like, "Oh, I went on a date with him years ago, he was okay." But there were others like PM me for the tea, and one woman said, "He's an angry asshole, stay away for your safety." Because it's FB, I instantly recognized her name as someone I went on a date with last summer, who I had to block after she repeatedly tried to sell me her cat. Absolute lunatic. A few things about me. I am single. I have never been married, and my last relationship was over a year ago. I am very selective, and Danielle was the first date I'd been on since the end of summer. I am also a very private person. I don't use social media, and I don't kiss and tell. The fact that my photo is on this site is mortifying. What makes matters worse is when I got home I started getting texts from a bunch of other people I know either laughing at me or calling me a womanizer. As of now I'm aware that several female friends have seen it, one coworker, my sister, and a woman I know who lives in the same building as me that excitedly grabbed me when I was leaving this morning to tell me, "I saw you on that Facebook group." Apparently it's a lot more popular than I realized. There's only one person who would have the motivation to do this, so I called Danielle on the weekend and asked her. Initially she denied it, but after some prodding that flipped to apparently her friend posting it. Why? Because a few of them had gotten tipsy together on Valentine's, as they're all single. My name came up after her friends asked why she wasn't with me that night after the great date she'd told them about. Apparently me not being around as I was leaving early the next morning for work was suspicious, as was the fact we'd been talking for multiple weeks, but she'd never seen my place. She gave them a pic I used on the dating app, and one of them posted it. She told me she was sorry, but that I seemed too good to be true. Her last relationship ended due to cheating, and she wanted to make sure I wasn't married or in a relationship. I told her I needed some time to think, and would be in touch. That was Saturday. We've been silent until today, where I woke up to dozens of MSGs from her saying things along the lines of, "I'm so sorry / I'm so angry with myself for this," and then the real truth. It was her that posted it. She wanted to come completely clean and apologized for lying, telling me she panicked when I confronted her, but she wants it all out now. She sent me screenshots, unprovoked, of the PM conversations she was having with women in the group about me. Aside from the one head case I mentioned earlier, there was nothing accusatory, but what I couldn't get over was how they were discussing me in such an open manner. It had nothing to do with whether I was single or cheating. It was stuff like, he took me to this restaurant, he drives this kind of car, this is what he's like in bed, this is what his place is like, this is how much money I think he makes. I would never talk about exes or people I've dated like that. And if a guy tried to talk to me about Danielle like that, I'd think he was a fucking weirdo and tell him to stop. My two closest female friends are divided on this, so I'm here for advice. One thinks that women need to protect themselves against predators and violence, and groups like this are necessary. The other is angry on my behalf because the presumption of men being posted to that group are that they're cheaters or sketchy. Otherwise, why would anyone even post them there? I really don't know what to do next. I've never had to deal with anything remotely like this before. I liked Danielle, but it was one date. She also lied to me about it at first. This seems like a headache, and we've never even had sex yet. Is she going to get even more paranoid after that? It doesn't feel like we're compatible. This feels like the past 3 weeks of us talking have been one massive waste, and that actually stings because she's the first person I've really liked since my ex. A couple of months ago, I matched with Anna on Bumble. I thought we vibed really well. She had a really nice and funny demeanor, and we had lots of engaging conversations on FaceTime. We set up our first dinner date last week. I proposed a really nice restaurant, which was sort of far from where we lived, but I really wanted to treat Anna because I thought she was special. Anna asked if I could pick her up, and then after the date drop her off at her best friend's place. I didn't mind at all. Anna said she had movie night with her best friend. I picked Anna up, and we went to the restaurant. The date went better than expected. We vibed really well. Anna also had drinks since I was the designated driver. However, right at the end of the date, Anna asked if I would drop her off at Josh's. I was initially confused, and then realized Josh was her guy best friend. Anna instantly realized what she said, and it sort of became awkward. Anna apologized, and I told Anna there was no reason to apologize. I was just curious about who Josh was, so I asked Anna, and Anna said he was her guy best friend, and they occasionally have movie nights. Anna said she wanted to be honest with me because she really liked me and saw a future with me, and she admitted they sometimes make out during these movie nights, but it doesn't go further than that. I appreciated Anna's honesty, but this whole thing felt like a huge gut punch. I was maybe in my feelings, but I just couldn't do it anymore. I told Anna to just ask Josh to pick her up, and I paid for my portion of the dinner and left. Anna looked really sad when I ended the date and left. I felt sort of guilty about it later and called my sister to ask her if what I had done was right. My sister said I shouldn't have left Anna stranded at the restaurant, especially after Anna was really sweet and honest with me. I told my sister how I could be expected to take Anna for a really fancy dinner and then drop off her at her guy best friend's house, where she would then make out with him. I had enough self-respect left not to do that. Since I left Anna at the restaurant last week, she texted me a couple of times, but I just ignored those messages. I opened the messages a couple hours ago, and I was sort of surprised. Instead of lashing out at me, she just apologized again and said she was willing to stop seeing Josh if it meant we could continue our relationship. She said after the dinner, she just took an Uber back home and didn't go to Josh's. I texted Anna that there was no reason to apologize and I shouldn't have left her stranded at the restaurant, and I should have also paid for her meal, since I was the one who invited her to the expensive restaurant. I asked Anna for her Venmo, but Anna said she didn't care about the money and asked if we could continue our relationship. However, I didn't have the same feelings for Anna anymore, so I texted Anna up front that I don't think we're compatible, and I don't want to continue this. We chatted a bit more, and Anna was very respectful of my decision, but admitted she was sad. I too admitted it was tough, but it's best for everyone that this doesn't continue further. That was the final text, and I definitely think there are valuable lessons learnt from this entire thing. My ex and I broke up around 4 months ago, after dating for a little over a year. She was the one who broke up with me, but at the time I agreed that it was for the best, so we ended things on good terms. We're pretty chill now, and we have mutual friends, so we often all hang out together. So things between us are chill and friendly. I work at a research lab at my university, and I just recently landed the position after a pretty damn long and competitive application/interviewing process. I met my boss, who's a grad student, and we became buddies pretty fast. He's a really nice and funny dude that knows what he's doing. I see him every day since me and two other undergrads work under him and help with his research while he helps use with our own. Fast forward about 2 weeks, and I see on my ex's Snapchat story a fucking picture of my boss with a heart emoji. I'm shocked as fuck, so I reply to her story asking her who her new boy is, and sure enough, she tells me she's dating my boss. I feign happiness for her, and I don't tell her that he's my boss, or that I know him in any way. But damn, I felt like someone just stabbed me in the heart. Although I didn't have feelings for after our breakup, but after seeing her story, I was just hit with a pang of jealousy. Maybe it's because he's a major step up from me. I'm a poor, disorganized undergrad, and then he's a successful, young talent who has his shit together. The next day at work, I'm basically on edge the whole day. I would look at my boss, remember that he's dating my ex, and just feel so uncomfortable. The rest of the week was like that too. I stopped joking around with him, and kind of just stopped talking in general to him. Now I dread seeing him every day because the fact that he's my boss, so he orders me around, just makes me feel shittier and more below him. He's got the girl and I've got no one. I still love my job though, and I worked so hard to get it, so I'm not planning on leaving. I also feel like a shitty person since my boss has been nothing less of nice and is honestly a great guy. Now I just feel like I should have tried harder in our relationship because damn, she was pretty perfect in every way, and I just let his all slip through. The other day, she came over to have lunch with him during his lunch break, and I saw them laughing together, and yeah, another wave of sadness and jealousy. What do I even do now? How do I stop feeling like this? How should I normalize the situation at work? I've been trying to focus on myself and my work and not care about my ex and my boss who's dating her. It worked pretty well. I started a painting, and I'm pretty close to finishing it, and I impressed my boss, the professor who owns the lab, not the one dating my ex, by staying late for 2 days in a row to finish a really difficult experiment. During our lab meeting, my boss shouted me out in front of the entire lab and said he was really impressed by my hard work and dedication. That felt good. As for the situation with my boss and my ex, he found out. Like I mentioned in my previous post, when my ex told me who her new boyfriend was, I didn't mention that he was my boss, so neither of them knew. 2 days ago, my boss and us, two other undergrads, were in a conference room discussing a paper when my ex came in. She came to drop off my boss's wallet that I think he forgot or something. Anyway, she saw me, did a double take and went, "Jayaki?" She was definitely super surprised and caught off guard, and her boss was already like, "WTF?" So I was just like, Sarah." She shot me another shocked wide-eyed look and left. Suffice to say, the rest of the meeting was pretty awkward. The next day, it was obvious that my boss now knew our history. Things just turned so awkward. Like he didn't know how to act around me anymore, and what to say. Now we're both awkward around each other. He's still nice and all, but things are just uncomfortable between us two now. It's not his fault though. I think that things will get better between the two of us, but as of right now, I actually feel kind of relieved that he now knows. Something about how both of us now don't know how to act, and what to do kind of makes me feel reassured. Sarah also called me the night that she found out I worked there, but I missed her call and forgot to call back. It's good though. I've been trying to think of her less and distance myself a bit. But if things continue to remain really awkward to the point where both of our work is affected, I'll consider talking to my boss about switching me to work under another grad student instead. But yeah, that's about all. Again, thanks for the help, guys. So me, 22 male, and my ex, 22 female, were together for half a year. I had always treated her the best I could. Her friends and family would tell her how absolutely lucky she was to have met me, and for the first time I felt accepted. About 3 months into our relationship, we're out with her friend getting her nails done. No big deal to me. She lets me use her phone for something, and a snap from a guy I've never seen before goes off. I try to not be nosy, but she always gives me updates about herself, and if people add her, so I had found it just weird. I go through and find her role-playing with another guy. She had sent him our personal video as well, something I was uncomfortable making in the first place, but she wanted to record and push. I find out video, her nudes and weeks worth of cheating. I was an idiot and took her back after she said she would change and prove it. I went against my instincts and took her back anyways. Another 3 months go by with 0 issues. She's happy, she's constantly reminding me how much I make her happy, please her, wants to marry me, have my kids, get a hotel room, all types of that. When she comes over again, at the start of the year, we fall asleep at my house. She's asleep in my arm when I just had that shaky gut feeling. I couldn't shake it, so I checked her phone. I found nothing on Snap, so I checked her messenger and messages. That's where I had found her texting her ex-boyfriend, who she claimed up down left right, that she hated him, ruined her life, and everything. They had been video calling for the whole month with some other person who she, my ex, refused to tell me who they were talking about. After that I went to Messenger where I found a message saying, "I'll do it after my boyfriend's." In my head I was thinking, who is this guy? I click it, and for the entire month and longer they've been video calling. She's sending him nudes, and the whole time the only thing I could focus on was, I'm with my BF. I'm at my BFS, she would keep saying boyfriend, knowing she shouldn't be doing it. Well, after I find out me and her split, she calls to talk it out, and I start asking how long she's done this. She says not long, but I've learned that she is a pathological liar. She then says the guy she sent the nudes to was none other than her cousin, who I had met a month prior for Christmas. They were messing around at this point. I have since learned that she's lied about her friend, who has the same name as me. She wanted me and him to be friends so she could hang out with him. Turns out they were FK buddies for years. Then she introduces me to her friend's friend, making it seem like she knows him only through her friend. Turns out they were also FK buddies. And a week after we break up, she is messaging me crying how she wants me back. Another chance. She'll change, blah blah blah. Turns out she was having sex with the sex guy she wanted me to be friends with that very same night, as she was trying to have me come over and fix things. Sorry if it's hard to follow. Punctuation has never been a strong suit of mine, not as typing moral of the story. Just because they say it doesn't mean they'll do it. Please pay attention to actions more than words. An update for you all. She has reached out to me multiple times in attempts to get me back, and I decided to talk to her and listen to what she had to say. At this point I have genuinely no interest in her. She basically goes on to tell me how she only wants me. I found her new Facebook account with a picture of her kissing one of the guys. She wanted me to be friends with the same week that she's actively telling me she only wants me. To clarify, it was the very first of on the new account. She then changed it 3 times. To try and cover it, I guess? I then asked if she even knew how I felt, and she would respond with the most base-level answers. I asked her if she knew why she was apologizing, and she then took 2 minutes to type a perfectly paragraph capitalized and punctuated apology. She spells your you are. I want to take a moment to sincerely express how sorry I am for the way things ended between us. Looking back, I realize there were moments I could have handled differently and feelings I didn't fully appreciate at the time. I never meant to hurt you, and it truly pains me to think of the impact my actions had on our relationship. I've spent a lot of time reflecting on our shared experiences, and I genuinely regret any pain I caused you. You deserve happiness and love, and I hope that you can find it, whether with me or someone else. I'm grateful for the memories we made, and want you to know that I wish you nothing but the best moving forward. She has never typed like this, and after she sent it immediately went back to the extremely typical please, okay, yeah, and super simple responses. She has made multiple accounts. I have blocked them all. I am genuinely trying to move on with my life. Next week I'm signing up for a MMA gym so I can compete as an amateur, something I've always wanted since middle school. I am not going back to her, and I've decided to keep working on myself. I've started eating a little better, and this past week I've been back in the gym. I've been gone for about a month. I used to go regularly, and it just kind of feels nice to be back on track. I am 30 and my brother is 32. I'm just going to call him my boyfriend for the majority of the time while I type this. I feel weird about this. I was adopted as a baby, but I didn't know that I was adopted until I was in high school. It didn't feel betrayed or care much. I love my parents, and my parents love me. Who cares if they aren't my real parents? My boyfriend was also adopted, and when we met it was one of the things we sort of bonded over. We both didn't learn we were adopted until high school, and we both were lucky and had good families. We weren't passed around from foster home to foster home. Our relationship was, and still is, great. We understood each other very fast. We were attracted to each other quickly. I've never met someone and felt immediate attraction and familiarity. Now I know that the comfort and familiarity is because he's my brother. Not my half-brother. He is my full brother. We've done everything a couple that has been together for 6 years could do. We've said we love each other, we've had sex, we've celebrated anniversaries, we've met each other's families. I'm just glad we both agreed early on that we don't want to have kids, so that has never happened. I don't want to deal with the health risks and have to raise a child and them know that their parents are siblings. I discovered it when we did the DNA test thing to see our ancestry and what exactly we are. I ordered 2 for us, we spit in the tube and sent it out. It took like a month for the results to come back, and I was excited to see what we were, but before I could even get to that, I saw that we were siblings. I was shocked to say the least. I only just found out this information, and I haven't told my boyfriend. I'm really hoping they made a mistake, but things are kind of starting to make sense to me now. We always get the "you guys look so alike," or "he's the male version of you." Long before this test, we've always gotten compared. We always just laughed it off, but I have spent the morning looking at pictures of us together and realizing that we really do look so alike. It's freaking me out, and I don't know what I should do. I still love my boyfriend/brother, and we have been together for 6 years. We have a house together and a whole comfortable life. I'm hoping that this test is wrong, and we'll do a real test soon, but I'm panicking. I still see him as the love of my life. I posted my original post about a year ago, and after a month or so I just never really checked this account. Well, I was scrolling TikTok the other day and saw my post read out loud on there, and it really was shocking. The video I saw was people on a stage reading it, and the crowd being shocked and disgusted, as if we grew up together and chose this. If when we met I knew he was my brother, I would not have gotten with him. Anyway, everyone is begging for an update. To make a long story short, my update is that we are still together and have been together. Rather than get a real DNA test done at a doctor, we just left it at that. We read that those ancestry tests are pretty accurate, and it was interesting to learn of other relatives we have, because ancestry links you to other people that have taken the test and share your DNA. Something that was questioned a lot was, why would you two randomly both take DNA tests? And we are both adopted. We want to know what we are. Everyone else growing up could say like, my family is Irish, or my family comes from Germany, or my great-great-grandmother used to do this. We have none of that. We private our ancestry and decided not to get another test because that is just more people involved. I didn't even have to tell him when the news broke. We both had login information to the ancestry, so he saw it himself. It was a lot to get over and talk about. I have to admit, it was really hard to look at him in that way for a while. We slept in separate places. For a while I felt weird around him. But we're 6 years in by that time, and I still loved him, and still do love him. My weirdness was different than how I feel with my actual brothers. I consider the kids of my parents to be my actual brothers. If I were to date one of them, I would feel odd, because I grew up with them. With my boyfriend/brother, it was just a crazy, what are the odds feeling. And looking at him and seeing myself and seeing our parents that we never knew. We talked about it, and we have decided to just stay together. We don't want kids, and no one else knows, so who are we hurting? I don't care about all the comments that call us disgusting. I don't see him as a brother. I don't find the fact that he is my biological brother hot or exciting. I just see him as the man I love. We have been able to joke and find humor about it within ourselves. My boyfriend joked, we could have saved money on the ancestry and just sent one test in. Back when Game of Thrones was really popular, before that terrible ending, we went to a Halloween party and I dressed as Cersei. Recently he was like, I should have dressed like Jaime. This may seem weird or off-putting to people reading this, but it is how we find levity in it all. Another misconception I kept seeing was that we met in high school. We met when I was 20. We had a really normal relationship. It was from friends to best friends to couple. He is honestly the love of my life. We've been together 7 years now, and I've never gotten tired of him. I've never felt like I wanted to be apart from him. Even during the big discovery, I missed sharing a bed with him. I've never felt more at home and comfortable with a person, and it has nothing to do with him being my brother. No one will know. We aren't having children. We still do everything we did as a couple before finding out. I don't see him as my brother. I would actually feel gross if I slept with my real siblings.